All right, Shabbos say good morning, good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Stephen Tarizin, for dedicating all B'Shum and Droshos this month in honor of the birth of their grandson, Matan Shmuel Aaron. Baby Zochei Meretz Hashem to grow to a true Ben Torah ad 120 Shanim Tovos. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Haley and Ari Lichterman, in memory of Haley's mother, Rachel Leah Bas Ruvain Meir Zichron Livracha, and an anonymous sponsorship, Le'ili Nishmas Sarah Dina Bas Eli Melech Zichron Livracha, and Le'ili Nishmas Moshe Aaron Alter Ben Yosef Binyamin Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in nechama. I will say, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. I don't think we've ever had this much to do in one shir, but in Meretz Hashem, it's fantastic. Always great to have new accomplishments and new finish lines to cross. So I will say, today's daf is Lamed Vav. We are actually starting, I'm a little shtickle embarrassed, on Lamed Hamid Aleph. Okay, we're good. It's all right. It's all good. 35a, we left up on the bottom. I want to point out on the bottom, so it's much better. Right, so we left off all the way on the bottom of Lamed Hamid Beis, and we left off right in the story of Uzzah, or right after the story of Uzzah, where Uzzah dies as a result of having touched the Aron when it was being transferred to Yerushalayim. The Gemara frames this idea, or this episode, or the death of Uzzah, as a punishment for David HaMelech. Why was David HaMelech punished? So the Gemara explains over here, because David HaMelech went ahead and referred to Torah as Zmiros. Right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Torah is Zmiros, Torah is a song, Torah is the kind of thing like we saw before, that if you blink, it goes away. So to show David HaMelech that Torah is not simply Zmiros, but Torah is something serious, he caused David HaMelech to make a mistake in halacha that is like a Pashat halacha. What was a Pashat halacha? Pashat halacha was, you don't have to worry about the Aron. How do you know that you don't have to worry about the Aron? Because from the Yarden we saw Aron no se es no sav. If the Aron has the ability to carry those who carry it, the Aron certainly has the ability to do what? To take care of itself. So this was considered to be a punishment for David HaMelech. So I'll say, so the Maharsha, I know it's not a good idea to start off with the Maharsha before I even do a line of Gemara, but I do have to share this with you. The Maharsha says, so what was so wrong with David HaMelech calling Torah Zmiros? I don't know, again, if I didn't know better, it sounds to me so beautiful. A zemer, a song, is something so uplifting, so magnificent, so beautiful. So what's wrong with David HaMelech calling Torah Zmiros? And the Maharsha says something absolutely amazing. I just want to read this to you. He says, Ki hazemer hu befiv shel adam lefi sha'a, aval divrei Torah him tzrichim tmidis shelo yamushu mipiv, kedei shelo yishtachach mimenu. We'll say a zemer, a song, right? When is it with you? When you're singing it. And the moment that you finish singing the song, then what? It's done, right? Or for that matter again, the song, you finish singing one song, you move on to something next. You move on to the next thing. The power of Torah is in its continuity, right? The power of Torah is in its consistency, right? Torah is not sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't have it. The goal, the aspiration is that Torah is something that remains part of me at all times. A zemer comes and go. Sometimes you sing, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you like this song, sometimes you like that. So I want to say, right, you ever have this where you have a song that you find that you absolutely love and can't get enough of it, and so you keep on singing it and singing it and singing it until one day you mamish, like you cannot listen to it anymore. I happen not to have that problem. I'm the opposite, right? Much to the disdain of others, right? But lamaisa, that's a Torah's not Zmiros. A zemer, you sing it very nice, then you move on to something else. Torah, consistency, always with which Rabbi say frames for us what our goal is in Torah, right? Our goal ultimately is not just simply to learn more. I mean, it's always good to learn more. That's not the goal. The goal is that Torah should be part of me. And Torah should always be part of me. Part of that occurs through learning, and the more learning you do, the more it has the ability to become part of me. But Lamaisa, that's the goal. That's the goal. And by the way, making Torah part of me doesn't just come through learning. Making Torah become part of me is learning and then living. Learning and then living. That's the chilik. That's why David HaMelech is held accountable for calling Torah Zmir. Such an incredible idea. In any event, so the Gemara says as follows. Second to last line. Goes quickly. Vayach ba'anshe Beit Shemesh kira'u ba'aron mishum. So the Gemara is both saying now different story. This is now a different story. This story now is from Shmuel Aleph. This was after, remember again, the sons of Eli die in war, right? We were, Baruch Hashem, Yachikala was in Shiloh not so long ago, where the Mishkan sat. So remember again, Eli's two sons did not follow in their father's way. They went out to war with the Plishtim. They took the Aron with them. They lost. They died. The Aron was taken captive by the Plishtim. Wherever the Aron went in Philistine territory, terrible consequences for the inhabitants. They decided to send back the Aron. So what did they do? They just put the Aron on a wagon and they just said, go. So now this is where it's picking it up. The people of Beit Shemesh saw the Aron, right? They were smitten. They were smitten with the plague because they saw the Aron. So the Gemara says, Mishum dera'u vayach. Because they saw the Aron, they were smitten with the plague. One say the problem was when the people of Beit Shemesh saw the ark, they were harvesting their field. They didn't stop harvesting. They just kept on harvesting, like, oh, look, the Aron's back, right? So that was considered to be a lack of respect to the Aron. The other possibility is they actually spoke disrespectfully to the Aron. What did they say? Amud Beis, I told you we are flying. So the Gemara says, Man amrech laha, de amrius uman osalech de faisis. They said to the Aron, like cynically, right, or sarcastically, Aron, what happened, right? Who got you so angry that you left us? And who appeased you that you decided to come back? So they spoke like a shtickle cynically to the Aron. Vayach ba'am shivim ish v'chamishim elef ish. So they were, I will say, the wording here is interesting. There were 70 people and 50,000 people who were killed in this plague because they were disrespectful to the Aron. So I'll say, so the numbering here is a little bit interesting, right? 70 people and 50,000 people. Rabbi Avo, Rabbi Eliezer, Chad Amar Shevim Yeshayu. It was only 70 people who were killed. Not only, Chas Shalom. There were 70 people who were killed. V'chol echad ve'echad shakol ki chamishim elef. But each of them were as great, were as righteous as 50,000 people. V'chad Amar chamishim elef hayu. Others say, no. There were 50,000 people who were killed in this plague. V'chol echad ve'echad shakol k'shivim Sanhedrin. But each of those individuals was as pious, was as holy as an entire Sanhedrin. 70 people. V'hi ki tza'ado no se aron Hashem shisha tza'adim. V'yizbach shar umari. So we'll say, so now we're jumping around a little bit in Jewish history. So we'll say, so now this particular pasuk is again in Shmuel Beis, talking about when they're bringing the Aron to Yerushalayim, right? They're bringing the Aron to Yerushalayim. So now, remember, the Navi says that essentially as they're bringing the Aron, it's very festive, because now the Aron, this is obviously before the Beis HaMikdash is built, right? But David HaMelech wants to make a more permanent home, a pre-Beis HaMikdash, for the Aron. So there's a lot of celebration bringing the Aron up to Yerushalayim. So the Navi says, what do they do? Listen to this. It says, Vahiki tza'adu, as they're walking towards Yerushalayim, no se Aron Hashem, so as they're taking the Aron, Shisha tza'adim, sounds like every 6 steps, Vayizbach shar umari. They went ahead and they offered up a shar. A shar is an ox. We'll say Mari literally means a fattened animal. So a fattened animal could either be a calf or it could be a sheep. It could be either one. Okay. So what happens? So we'll say every 6 steps, can you imagine that? Every 6 steps, they went ahead and they offered up these 2 karbanos. So, but here's another pasuk. Ksiv, Shiva parim, v'shiva elim. But then it says 7 cows and 7 rams. So which one is it? What do they offer? It's not a problem. Akol psio psia shara mari. Listen to this. Rabbi Shmuel says, every step they took, they offered an ox and a fattened animal. I'll call sheish v'sheish psios. Every 6 steps, they offered shiva parim v'shiva elim, 7 cows and 7 rams. A lot of animals. Amar li Rav Chisda im came mileisa es kol Eretz Yisrael bamos. Let's say if that's the case, first of all, that procession is going to take years, right? And then again, what you essentially does is you filled Eretz Yisrael with altars. In other words, I will say every step, every 6 steps. Rather, I will say Rav Chisda says like this: on every 6 steps, shor umari. So they didn't offer anything every step, every 6 steps, they offered up shora marie, an ox and a fattened animal. Al kol shisha sdarim shel sheish psios, every 6 units of 6 steps, shiva parim v'shiva elim. They offered up again. It's much better, right? Otherwise, it is much better because it's not every step. It's not every step. It's every 6 steps, and then every 6 units of 6. Okay, let's say, you know what? So, I've come to find, and I don't know, I feel this is one of the greatest things I struggle with, is that, can you imagine like engaging in something and not worrying about time? Not worrying about time, right? In other words, we'll say that's what this is. That's like, we are bringing the Aron to Yerushalayim. And however long it takes, right? Because we think about this, we're like, 6 steps? 6 steps, you stop me for a couple. First of all, I just want to point out, it's every 6 steps, but remember, offering karbanos is not like chick-chack. You know what I'm saying? Like it takes a little bit of time as well. So what are we thinking? I got to get on with my day. I don't even know what I have to do, but like I'm thinking about this, I'm like, I got to get out of here already, right? This is, let's say, it's such an interesting thing. Like we're always, I don't, maybe not all of us, right? I often feel like we're always running to something. There's always something. So it's everything in life. Whatever I'm doing, my mind is always on the clock, like, where do I have to be next? And while that might be good, like from an accomplishment perspective, often what it does is it erodes the real quality of our life experiences. Because to a certain degree, we're never really fully present. I'm here, but I have my eye on the clock because I have to be at the next thing. I think, to me, part of the beauty of this is the only way you're doing this is you have clearly cleared your calendar, right? You've got nothing else going on that day, which is, let's say, I'll tell you, the truth is, like, we had such a beautiful trip to Eretz Yisrael and our Yarchei Kala. That was part of the beauty of the Yarchei Kala. Right? When we were in Eretz Yisrael, there was just like, the calendar was cleared. Like whatever, wake up. Most people woke up, right? So the mice again, whenever you wake up, whenever you go to sleep, there's nothing else. It's something. I find this one of the great, and we have to get back to this. Okay, in any event, so I'll say, so this is what happens. But again, just understand, that's the power of something like this. So you think to yourself, every 6 steps, yeah, every 6 steps, because every single person there, they were like, this is what I'm doing. And I'm not thinking about what I'm doing next. I'm not thinking about what else is on the calendar, because there's nothing else going on but this. A fully immersive experience. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Ksiv Kidon, Ksiv Nachon. So I'll say the Gemara is just pointing out over here that ultimately, again, the story of Uzzah, so the place where this tragedy happened, one pasuk calls it Kidon, one pasuk calls it Nachon. Rabbi Yochanan Betchila Kidon L'Basof Nachon. In the beginning it was called Kidon, in the end it was called Nachon. Good. Nimtseis Ata Omer Shlosha Minei Avarim. So I'll say, what's very exciting about this Gemara, you have to admit, is we are spanning Jewish history. I mean, whatever, a limited chunk of Jewish history, but really quite fascinating, right? We've now, by the way, gone all the way pretty much from the Yarden, from coming into Eretz Yisrael, all the way through the times of David HaMelech, right? And we've gone back and forth through this. Now we're back to the Yarden, right? Back to the Jordan River. So the Gemara says, Nimseis Ata Omer Shlosha Minei Avanim Hayu. It turns out, Rabbi say, that in fact there are 3 sets of stones. 3 sets of stones. Echad shehekim Moshe be'eretz Moab. Now, Rabbi say there's the first set of stones that Moshe Rabbeinu himself set up in Eretz Moab. Now, Rabbi say Eretz Moab actually becomes the Transjordanian lands, which become the tribal area of the 2.5 tribes. But originally it was called Eretz Moab. So Moshe Rabbeinu sets up 2 sets of stones over there. And what happens, or I should say, a set of stones over there, and we'll say what happened. The So we'll say, now listen to this. The stones that Moshe Rabbeinu made had the Torah written on it in 70 languages. Right? This was like before you enter into the land. Here, what Eretz Yisrael is built on. Here, what Eretz Yisrael is predicated on. It's the Torah. And it's the Torah in 70 different languages. So God, about again why the Torah was translated into 70 languages, not just for the nations of the world, but for us as well. So the first set of stones established by Moshe Rabbeinu, and on the other side, we'll call it on the eastern side of the Jordan, even before you go into Eretz Yisrael. Next, Interesting. Yoshua set up stones inside of the Jordan River itself. Shneimar, Ushtem Esrei Avanim Heikim Yoshua b'Socha Yarden. Yoshua established 12 stones inside of the Jordan River. And I will say the third set, the Echad Shehekim b'Gilgal. The third set of stones are the stones they set up in Gilgal. Shneimar, Ves Shtem Esrei Avanim Ha'ela Sher Lakchu. The 12 stones ultimately again that they took from Gilgal. But remember again, after going to Har Grizim and Har Eval, so Gilgal was the first place they camped. Okay, so they took the stones. So we'll say, so one set of stones established by Moshe on the eastern side of the Jordan. Second set of stones by Yoshua inside of the riverbed itself. Third set of stones, we're going to see they first go to Har Grizim and Har Eval, and then afterwards ultimately come to Gilgal. Incredible. Tarabanan. So let's say, watch this. So now we'll say, we know that on the stones established in Gilgal, and on the stones on the other side of the Jordan, the Torah was written in 70 languages. That was their goal. Their goal was really to be a testament, a monument to Torah, right? It's all 70 languages. So we'll say now the Gemara is going to discuss Torah. So how was the Torah written on those stones? So we'll say, so again, we're all agreed, Be'er Hetev means 70 languages. How was it written? Rabbi Yehuda says, Al Gabe Avanim Kasvuha. They wrote it on the stones itself. In other words, they engraved it on the stone. It's called after they wrote it on the stones, they then covered the stones with a layer of plaster. So I don't understand. You're writing it on the stone and then you're covering it with plaster? That doesn't make any sense. Then how is anyone learning it? Right? Wasn't the whole point of this that the nations of the world should come and they should have access to Torah? So by the way, I just want to point out, not our topic for today, but there is a fascinating topic in general about the concept of non-Jews learning Torah. Non-Jews learning Torah. So we'll say what's fascinating to see is that the Torah was written in 70 languages so that the nations of the world should be able to see the Torah. Right? There is a wisdom in this for the entire world. So the problem is if you're coating it with plaster or with lime afterwards, how is anyone seeing anything? I will say this is incredible. Amarlo, Bina Yisir Nasa and Akash Baruch Hu gave extra wisdom to the nations of the world. The Shigru Notrin Shalahen, the Kilfu Es Hasid, the Siu. Sorry, Vesiua. So we'll say, listen to this. Akash Baruch Hu went ahead and gave special wisdom to the nations of the world and gave them this ability to peel back the plaster to be able to see the writing. Okay. And for this, the nations were condemned because they had the opportunity to learn, but they did not do so. We'll say, what is this? What is this? You want them to learn, that's why you write it in 70 languages, then you cover it with plaster, but it's okay because you give them the wisdom to remove the plaster, but they didn't remove the plaster, and therefore they're held accountable. I have a better idea. Just don't put the plaster. Right? Why don't we just make it a little bit easier? We'll say, Elamai, Torah is only acquired through effort. You have to put in some effort. There has to be some level of amelus. And if you're not amel, if I'm not willing to go ahead and put in effort, you cannot acquire the treasures of the Torah. Simply impossible. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Umos ha'olam, I am happy to give you Torah. But you're going to have to roll up your sleeves a little bit. You're going to have to go and remove the plaster. We'll say also removal of the plaster. It's also very metaphorical, right? What does it also represent? Ultimately, again, sometimes the removal, like of the arla that surrounds the heart, right? Like the Navi says that sometimes, again, there's a certain arelos, there's like a foreskin that covers the heart. There's sometimes a barrier that covers the heart that prevents Torah and Ruchnius from penetrating. If you want Torah, you have to remove the layer of plaster that's around you. But I will say, what's incredible about this? What's incredible is that at the end of the day, they're held accountable because they did not avail themselves of this opportunity. So I will say, in life, there's two sources of liability and culpability. Number one are the averos I commit. Number two is the failure to take advantage of life opportunity. The Rebbe Shalom puts so many things right at my doorstep, but I have to find the courage to be able to take it. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says, no, al gabe sid kasvua. No, not true. So Rabbi Shimon says, it's true. They put a layer of plaster on the stone, but they wrote on top of the plaster. Right, we'll say, which by the way, why write on top of the plaster? Why not just write on top of the stone? So remember again, obviously with the plaster, what do you have the advantage of? A smooth surface, right? A smooth surface. So they plastered the stone, and then they wrote in the plaster itself. So we'll say, now watch this. And at the bottom of the stone they wrote, so we'll say, so the pasuk, the entire pasuk is, so in order that you learn not to do all of the abominations that the nations who inhabited Canaan have done, and they have sinned to God. So as I will say, the bottom pasuk says it's a warning to Klal Yisrael. Don't be like the nations of Canaan. Now we'll say, who's going to see this? Who's going to see this? The nations of Canaan, right? And the other nations. So I will say, this is a call to tshuva. So I will say, this shows that sometimes the way that they were living was an abomination. This pasuk was to inspire the nations of the world to do what? To do tshuva. Both say, what does it mean to do tshuva if you're a member of the nations of the world? So the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, right? There's the renunciation and repudiation of Avodah Zarah. So this is incredible, because according to Rabbi Shimon, these stones were not only to give the nations of the world access to Torah, but it was to inspire them to do tshuva. Inspire them to do tshuva. Life doesn't have to be this way. You can turn it around. Absolutely incredible. What's Rabbi Shimon's logic that they wrote on top of plaster? So we'll say, ultimately, again, the nations will be burned like plaster. Al iske sid. Why are they burned? In other words, why are they held accountable? Because of the matter of the plaster. Meaning, in other words, they had access to Torah, which was written on top of the plaster, yet they did not avail themselves. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ki sid. Rabbi Yehuda says it's like sid, like plaster. Mas sid, ein lo takar el sreifa. Just like plaster can only be remedied through burning. Af osam akusim elem takana el sreifa. So to these kusim, which is here a generic reference to idolaters, if they don't do tshuva, their only tikkun is through streifas, through Gehenna. Kiman azla hadesanya vishavisa shivyo l'rabos kanan shebechutza. So we'll say, fast Torah, Parshas Kiseitze. Torah says that if you go out to battle, you can take a war bride. So we'll say this comes to include even Canaanim. Now we'll say, remember again, the 7 nations who lived in Canaan had a choice. What was the choice? Leave or die. Leave or die. That was the choice. What happens, however, let's say again there's a Canaani who leaves Eretz Canaan. So okay, Canaani leaves Eretz Canaan, fine, no problem. So now the Gemara is saying, what happens if a soldier went out to war, right, out of Eretz Yisrael, and he finds a Canaanite woman? Could he take her as a war bride? And the answer is yes. Right? I'll say ultimately again, if you have a Canaani in Chutz La'aretz who ultimately again does tshuva, that you could accept them. Accept them means that there's no obligation to obliterate them. So the Gemara says, Kiman top of Lamed Vav, Ki Rabbi Shimon. This is in accordance with the view of Rabbi Shimon. Incredible. Both say back to the Yarden. So Ba'urei Kamanisim Nasu Ba'osayim. Both say Lamed Vav Amadalef. Yay. Right. Lamed Vav Amud Aleph 36a, second line down, right? C. How many miracles occurred for Klal Yisrael on the day that we crossed the Jordan River? Watch this. So on the same day, listen to everything that happened on one day. In one day, we crossed the Jordan River. Right? Then we came to that first stop, Hagrizim and Hareval. Now remember again, so the distance between where they crossed in the Jordan and Hagrizim and Hareval is 60 mil. We'll say that's a lot of distance, right? Remember again, what did we say a mil was? 6/10, 7/10 of a mile. Remember again, you have 3.5 million people. You have 3.5 million people walking, right? They're walking to travel that distance in what? Impossible. But yet they did. And I will say no creature, either animals or man, was able to stand in front of Klal Yisrael. And anyone who would try to stand up with them, miyad nitras, would become so fearful that literally they would lose control of their bowels. Shene'emar es emosisha eshalach lefanecha va'amosi es kala amasher tava bahem va'omer Tipol aleim emasai v'fachad ad ya'avor amcha Hashem. Shabbos said, listen to this. So the pasuk says, literally, Tipol aleim emasai v'fachad, let the fear and awe of Klal Yisrael fall upon the nations. Zubia Rishona. Now let's say ultimately, again, this refers to when Klal Yisrael entered into Israel under Yoshua. Ad Ya'avor Am Zukanisa, Zubia Shnia. We'll say the second part of the pasuk refers to the entry under Ezra. This is right, we came into Eretz Yisrael twice. The first time we came into Eretz Yisrael was under Yoshua, right? The second time it was after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. We were exiled to Babel. And then Ezra led us back a second time. Now, we'll say it's interesting. The Gemara says, Amar Me'ata, Ru'uyin Hayu Yisrael Lasos Lahem Neis B'Biyar Shnia K'Biyar Rishona. I will say in reality, our second entry into Eretz Yisrael should have been with the same level of miraculous activity as accompanied our first entry into Eretz Yisrael. So what happened? Ella Shegaram Hachet. We'll say it's very profound, but rather what happened? Sin. Sin caused us not to have the same level of miraculous entry into Eretz Yisrael the second time under Ezra. I will say, and really, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, La'asos lahem neis, first short line, Lalos bizra v'lo yu mishtabdim l'malchus, ela shegaram. So I will say, when we came back with Ezra, really what was supposed to happen was, we were supposed to have autonomy, we were supposed to have literally victory, just like we did under Yoshua. So what happened? El shegaram chet am sheYisrael be made bias rishon. The nigzar aleim shelo ya'alu el b'shusavos. So it's interesting. When I first read this Gemara, I assumed that the chet that the Gemara was referring to was remember again, there was rampant intermarriage when Klal Yisrael was in exile. Remember, I will say only approximately only a few thousand people come back with Ezra. Right, the majority of the Jewish people remains in Bavel. Shevet Levi, right, the Levium, not Shevet Levi. The Levium were nowhere to be found. Right, can you imagine that? Like Levium wholesale did not come back with Ezra. So it's interesting. I assumed that was the Chet that the Gemara was referring to, but in fact Rashi says no. It's actually referring to the Chet for which the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Now I will say, why was the first Beis HaMikdash destroyed? So Chazal tells generally it's not one Chet, but rather it's three Chatam. It's generally because Klal Yisrael was derelict in the three cardinal sins of Gilaraz, immorality, Shfichos Dam, and murder, and idolatry. So also what the Gemara seems to say is Klal Yisrael did not fully rectify the misdeeds of the past. And because of that, that impacted the way they came into Eretz Yisrael, which Rabbi says is an incredible Musar Haskell, which is, if you don't fix the problems of your past, they absolutely will impact your ability to build a meaningful future. So Klal Yisrael didn't fix the baggage of the past. Well, if you don't fix the baggage of the past, then you cannot create the future. You cannot create the impactful future that is truly within reach. Such a Musar Haskell. So I'll say, so again, I just want to go back for just a second. So remember how we got into all this. So just to take note of everything that happened in one day of Klal Yisrael's entry into Eretz Yisrael, right? So they went ahead, they crossed the Jordan River, everyone crossed the river, right? They went ahead and they got to Agrizim and Har Eval. By the way, it's not finished. After that, they got to Gilgal, right? And all of that happens in the span of one day. Incredible. So listen, now watch this. Then they went ahead and they brought the stones, and they built an altar. And I will say now, this is talking about what they did at Hagrizim and Har Eval, right? They brought the stones. So this really refers to the third set of stones. They brought the stones to Hagrizim and Har Eval. They went ahead and they built an altar. Then after they finished the altar, they plastered it. They wrote on it the Torah. They offered up olos and shlamim. I will say, perhaps it's a little bit out of order. In other words, first, they used the stones as the altar. When they finished, they then plastered it and then wrote the Torah on it. They went ahead and they ate, they drank, they had simcha, right? So baruchu killu, which means they blessed and they cursed. Now, so just to be clear, in other words, that's talking about the blessing and the curses on Har Grizim and Har Eval. The kiflu es ha'avanim, then they dismantled the altar. Uba'u v'lana beGilgal, and they spent that night. We'll say it's a busy day, right? They spent that night in Gilgal. We'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, can you imagine, I was thinking about this, can you imagine having the schus to go back in history and spend that day with Klal Yisrael? Can you imagine that? Right, you start the day crossing the Jordan River, you get to Hagrizim and Har Eval, you hear the brachas and the klalos, karbanos, beautiful su'udah, celebration, dismantle the stones, plaster them, write on them, spend the night, overnight in Gilgal, right, on the itinerary, right, it's overnight in Gilgal, right, overnight in Gilgal. Let's say it's such one day, absolutely incredible. Shene'emar, va'avartem osam imachem v'inachtem osam b'molo. You will take the stones with you, and ultimately, again, leave them in the lodging place. Or not leave them, bring them with you to the lodging place. We'll say, you would have thought that maybe Klal Yisrael takes these stones with them everywhere they're going to stay. Ta'amul asher talinu bo halayla. Take them with you where you're staying that night. Uksiv, so we'll say, so ultimately, again, the last, in other words, the stones were erected in Gilgal, and that's where they were left, right? So that's where they were. We'll say that's what we saw before. They were quoting yesterday's daf, right? Two Tanoim who said that we saw the stones in Gilgal. Okay, good. So Tanaim says into this, Tzira la avrei mayim. The Tzira did not pass or did not follow them over the Jordan River. Now we'll discuss what the tzira is in just a moment. I will send the tzira before you. Now we'll say the tzira is some type of animal. We're going to see it's actually an insect that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent before the army in order to go ahead and paralyze or immobilize enemy forces. So the Gemara says that Tzira helped them in their battles in the desert, but did not follow them into Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara says, really? Is that true? After all, we learned it says, I will send the Tzira before you. Rabbi Shmuel Silber, al svas hayarden amda. So let's listen to this. The Tzira did not follow them over the Jordan. Rather, what did the Tzira do? So we'll say the Tzira was some type of insect that ejected, if that's the right word, ejected a venom. So watch this. So the Tzira stood on the other side, the eastern side of the Jordan, v'zarka bahen mara, and spit its poison onto the enemy forces on the other side, the western side of the Jordan, v'simta einehem, and blinded them, milamala, v'sirsata milamata, and made them sterile. So apparently, again, this is what the venom of the tzira, don't mess with the tzira, right? Blindness and sterility, right? And this immobilized, obviously, again, the enemy forces. Shneimar, v'anochi hishmareti es ha'amori mipneihem, asher kigova arazim gavu, v'chasonu ke'alonim, v'ashmid pirya mimal, v'sharasha mitachas. So Rav Papa says, shtei tziros have. There are actually two tziros, two of these insects. Chad de Moshe, v'chad de Yoshua. So we'll say there was the tzira that accompanied Moshe, and then there was the tzira that accompanied Yoshua. The Moshe lo avar, the Yoshua avar. Moshe's tzira did not cross the Jordan. Yoshua's tzira did. Incredible. Shisha shvatim al rosh hagrizim, as well as it's a really beautiful Gemara. So the Gemara says over here, remember, going back to Hagrizim and Har Eval. So remember again, how was it set up? There were 6 shvatim, 6 tribes on Har Grizim, 6 tribes on Har Eval. Remember again, the Levium, remember the Gemara described before, that the Aron was in the middle, right? The Kohanim surrounded the Aron, the Levium surrounded the Kohanim. So the Gemara says, so now listen to this, my v'achatzio. So remember again, the pasuk itself, just to understand the pasuk, the Chol Yisrael is kinu b'sholtriv, omdim mizeh u'mizeh la'aron, neged ha'kohanim ha'levim, no siyam b'ris Hashem, good, chatzio el mul har grizim, v'hachatzio el mul har eval. So we'll say, the way the pasuk is phrased is, it says, chatzio, half of them on har grizim, v'hachatzio, and the half on har eval. It's just a strange form of the word. Why doesn't it just say chatzio on Har Grizim and chatzio on Har Eval? Why v'hachatzio? So the Gemara says, my v'hachatzio. So we'll say, take a quick look at Rashi for just a moment. My v'hachatzio, b'yoshua hachiksiv, b'haikra dimasnisin, v'chol yisrael chatzio al mol Har Grizim, v'hachatzio al Har Eval. Lama li l'michtav v'hachatzio el mol Har Eval. Sorry, my v'hachatzio, the mashma ol chatzio miyuchad, O chetzio hanisgar b'makom achar. Shabbos say v'hachetzio means and the half. So and the half could either mean what? The half could either mean a specific half, or an aforementioned half. Shabbos say, so what does it mean? Rav Kahana, listen to this. Kederech shechalukin kan, kach chalukin ba'avne ephod. So we'll say the same way ultimately again that they are the same way that ultimately again they are split on the here on Har Grizim and Har Eival. Okay, let me just do earlier. The same way that they are split on here, that's the also way that they're split on the stones of the ephod. Then I will say, now watch this. What's the ephod? So remember again, the Avne ephod. There are two times that Klalis, the Shvatim's names are written on the Big Day Kahuna. One is on the Choshen, the breastplate. That everyone knows, right? The name of the Shvatim. The other, I will say, is on what we call the ephod, which is the apron. So the apron had shoulder straps. On the shoulder straps, there was a stone that essentially held the straps in place, right? Those stones are kisvos, right? On the shoulders of the Kohen. Those stones also had the names of the Shvatim engraved on them. So the Gemara wants to suggest that the same way that they stood on Har Grizim and Har Eival, that order, the order of the Shvatim, that's the way ultimately, again, the names were engraved on the shoulder stones of the Kohen as well. We'll say, look at Rashi. This is an incredible Rashi. Keder shechalukin, Rashi says, Hashvatim b'Har Grizim v'Har Eival kidichsiv. So we'll say, this is very important. Here's how they stood on Har Grizim and Har Eival. And I will say, here's what we know. We know explicitly how the Shvatim stood on Har Grizim and Har Eival. How do we know that? Navi tells us. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, the Torah tells us. So, Kidichsev, Eli Yamdu Levarech Es Ha'am, Vele Yamdu Ala Klala, Kachalukim Ba'avne Ephod, Shar Bahen Shisha Mishmosam, Hanach Shisha Dahar Grizim, Aksuvim Ala Achas, Vishisha Dahar Eival, Aksuvim Ala Shenis. So we'll say, the same way they're divided up on Har Grizim and Har Eival, that's the same way that they are divided up on the shoulder stones. On the shoulder stones. So we'll say, so just again, you can see it. If you have the psukim in your Gemara, so we'll say, here's how they stood. So just to tell you, here's how they stood. So Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Yosef, Binyamin. That's one mountain, right? And that's on Har Grizim. That's for the bracha. And for the klala, Ruvain, Gad, Asher, Zvulun, Dan, Naphtali. That's how they stood. So the same way that they stood, ultimately again Har Grizim and Har Eival, that's how their names are arranged, ultimately again on the shoulder stones as well. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, Shtei Avarim Tovos Hayu LeKohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol had two beautiful stones, Ak Seifav on his shoulders, Achaz Mikan B'Achaz Mikan. The Shemos Shnei Masar Shvatim Kasav Alein. And the names of the 12 tribes are written on it. Shishal Evenzu, V'Shishal Evenzu. 6 on one stone, 6 on another. Shnei Mar, Shisha Mishmosam Ala Even Achas. Shnia Kitoldosam, V'Lo Rishon Kitoldosam. The second stone had the Shvatim listed in birth order, but the first stone did not. Why? So we'll say, here was the only change. The Gemara wants to suggest over here that on the shoulder stones of the Kohen, the Shvatim were written in order with one exception. With one exception, Yehuda and Reuven are switched. That Yehuda was written before Reuven. That's what Rashi says, Kitol Keseder Leidasam, Shisha Achronim Kesidran, God, Asher, Yisachar, Zvulun, Yosef, Binyamin, Zeo said Leidasan, Vishish Rishon, Michtavu Ba, Yehuda, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Dan, Naphtali. So I will say, so this is the second opinion of the Gemara. First opinion of the Gemara says that the stones, the names were written on the shoulder stones in the same way they stood on Har Grizim and Har Eival. Second opinion, no, the Shvatim were written on the stones in birth order. The only exception was Yehuda was written before Reuven. Who was written before Reuven? That was the only exception. So the Gemara says, V'chamishim osios hayu, and in total, it was 50 letters. 50 letters, right? V'chamishim osios al evenzu, v'chamishim al evenzu, and 50 is right. 50 on one stone, 50 on the other stone. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Rabbi Chanina says no. Ahmed Beis will say, look at that. Ahmed Beis. Right, Ahmed Beis, Loki, wow, that is a long daf. That's one long looking daf, right? Loki derech. I got a little excited there. Right? Loki derech shechalukin b'chumash hapikudim. No. We don't go, right? They weren't divided up. The way ultimately, again, that they are written in Chumash Bamidbar. Rather, Loki derech shechalukin b'chumash hapikudim chalukim ba'avnei ephod. It's not the way they're written in Chumash Bamidbar, that they're divided up on the shoulder stones. Ella, Keder Shachalukim B'Chumash Sheni. Rather, ultimately, again, the way they are written in Shmos. Now, both say this refers literally to the opening. Ve'ele Shmos, right? Ruvain, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. Ketzad, B'nei Leah Kisidron, B'nei Rachel Kisidron. Echad mikan ve'echad mikan, right? Ultimately, again, the sons of Leah are written in their order. The sons of Rachel are written in their order. One on one stone, one on the other stone. U'bnei shvachas be'emsa, and the sons of the maidservants are written in the middle. Fine. If that's the case, so therefore you really have three opinions as to how the names were written on the shoulder stones of the Kohen. Either again, the way they stood on Hagrizim and Hareval. Number two possibility is Ketoldo, some birth order, the only exception being Yehuda written before Ruvain. Third possibility is the way they are mentioned in Chumash Shmos. The way they mentioned in Chumash Shmos. Okay, essentially with the sons of Leah on one stone, sons of Rachel on the other stone, and the sons of the maidservants kind of interspersed between the two. Incredible. But I will say, according to that last opinion, Mani Mikaim Kitoldo Sam, then what does it mean when it says that they're written in their birth order? Right? That's what it means. That's not the birth order. Kishmo's son Shekarlan Avian, Velo Kishem Shekarlan Moshe. It means that they were written with the names that they were given at their birth, but not with the names as Moshe referred to them. Now, what does that mean? How does Moshe refer to them? Ruvain, velo Ruvaini. Shimon, velo Shimoni. Dan, velo Hadani. Gad, velo Hagadi. So I'll say, ultimately, again, when Moshe Rabbeinu refers to the Shvatim, he often refers to them with a Yud at the end of their name. So what it means is the way they're written on the shoulder stones, Rabbi says, how, is ultimately, again, without the Yud, as they were given their birth names. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta de Rav Kahana, Tiyufta. This refutes the position of Kahana. Indeed, it is a refutation. So I will say, point out that ultimately, again, so we're not, Rashi says over here, Tiyufta de Rav Kahana, the Lecholi Alma Ein Zes Seder Hagrizim V'Har Eval. I will say, it seems to be 2 out of the 3 agree that it's not, 2 out of the 3 agree that it's not the order as they stood in Har Grizim and Har Eval. I will say, the Rambam Paskins, Halacha L'Maisa, that it was in birth order. It was absolutely in birth order. Again, he seems to side with the second opinion, that it's the sons of Leah on one side, the sons of Rachel on the other side, and ultimately, again, the Shvachos then divided between the 2 stones in birth order. Okay, fine. Kesef Mishnah has a whole discussion there on the Rambam also, just because the Rambam's order doesn't the Rambam's opinion doesn't seem to fit quite exclusively into any one of these opinions. But in any event, emerge 3 different opinions as to how the names of the Shvatim were written on the shoulder stones. So I'll say, so again, let's go back. How do we get into this? The pasuk says, half of the Shvatim will stand on Har Grizim, v'hachatzio, and the half will stand on Har Eval. So what is, again, we're trying to figure out what's the v'hachatzio. So Tana chatzio shamul Har Grizim, merube mechatzio shal Har Eval. To teach us that the half, the Shvatim, who stood on Har Grizim were more numerous than the half who stood on Har Eval. Why? Mipnei shelevi lamata. Because remember, again, I will say, Levi was missing. Right? Why was Levi missing? Because remember again, Shevet Levi, Kohanim and Leviim were standing in the valley, weren't standing on the mountains. Adrabah, because Levi were not standing on the mountain, therefore again, the Har Eval Chevra had a smaller amount. No. Remember, first I want to point out, Shevet Levi was among the smallest Shvatim. Right, they were small, so their numbers shouldn't really impact everything so much. Listen to this. This is absolutely incredible. So rather, the Gemara says, you're right. Even though Levi ultimately, again, was standing on the valley, so nevertheless, Bnei Yosef Imayim, the sons of Yosef, Bnei Yosef, right, Shevet Yosef, was ultimately on Har Eval. Shneimar, Vayidabru Bnei Yosef es Yoshua Leimar. So we'll say, remember, what the Chevra on Har Eval were lacking, because Levi wasn't there, they made up for it with having Yosef there. Because Shevet Yosef was Shevet Yosef, of course, is comprised of two Shvatim, become amongst the most prosperous, right, and numerous of the tribes. Listen to this. Vayidabru b'nei Yosef es Yoshua. Right, the sons of Yosef ultimately said to Yoshua. They said this is when they're dividing up Eretz Yisrael. So he said. So what do they say? Madua nasatli nachala goralecha. Why did you only give me one portion? V'chevel achad. V'ani am rav. We are a lot of people. Yoshua says to them, so you see from here that they're saying to Yoshua, we need more land. We need more land. So what does Yoshua say to Moses? It's so beautiful. Im am rav ata, if you are really so numerous, ale lechayara, go and live in the forest. Right? Go live in the forest. What does that mean? Amr lahen, lechu v'chabu asmechem be'arim, go and hide yourself in the forest. First, I would say, first white line, shlo tishlot bachem ayin hara. In order that the ayin hara, right, the evil eye should not take any hold on you. Now, I will say, just very quickly, what's the evil eye? What's ayin hara? So I'll say, remember again, ayin hara is never like a hocus pocus thing, right? We don't believe it. Ayin hara, we'll say, is, we've spoken this before. Ayin hara means, if you have a bracha, and you flaunt that bracha, or you utilize that bracha in a way which causes pain to other people, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes that bracha away. The Moshe Shalom gives us brachas in life in order to be able to do good for ourselves, to do good for others. So if my bracha becomes a source of pain for someone else, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm taking it back. So here, what happens? So Bnei Yosef say, Yoshua, we're such a big tribe, we're tribes, right? Yoshua says, oh boy, guys, go live in the forest, right? Baruch Hashem, you're prosperous, you have a lot. You better kind of get a little bit more underneath the radar, because you should be afraid of ayin hara. So Amrullah, you're supposed to listen to this. They said to Yoshua, we're not afraid of ayin hara. Zari di Yosef, lo shalta ba'ena bisha. Ultimately, again, so we'll say that, right, the offspring of Yosef, there is no Yetzer hara. Sorry, there is no ayin hara. So the chsiv ben poras Yosef, ben poras ale ayin. Ultimately, again, Yosef, al tihi kore ale ayin ella ole ayin. Right? Yosef, the tribe of Yosef himself and others, right, descendants of Yosef are ole ayin. What does ole ayin mean? They ultimately, again, they transcend or they ascend above the ayin. We're not subject to ayin hara. Special bracha of Yosef. Rabbi Chanina Amar Mehacha, the Yidgu Larov B'Karev Aretz. Remember again, this is the bracha that Yaakov Avinu gives to Menashe and Ephraim, that literally again they should be prosperous. B'Karev Aretz, in the midst of the land. Mad Dogim. Now both say B'Yidgu means they should be prosperous like fish. Why like fish? Mad Dogim Shavaya Mayim Mechasin Aleihem, just like fish in the water. Just like fish, the water covers them. Therefore, again, they're not subject to ayin hara. Vein ayin sholet espoin. Avzaro shel Yosef ein ha'ayin sholet espoin. So to the offspring of Yosef, ultimately, again, the evil eye, the ayin hara has no power over them. I both say, I have some dramatically amazing Torah to share with you on this from the Vishnitzer Rebbe, Schusi Yagin Elino, and the Baba Rebbe, but we're going to wait. The reason we're going to wait, I will say, is because in other words, why? I don't understand. Why does ayin hara not affect Yosef? This piece is going to make much more sense. I feel bad. Like we're going to learn the story of Yosef, and it's going to be dramatically amazing. Let's learn that story first, and then come back to this Gemara, because this statement that the descendants of Yosef are not subject to Yetzer hara makes more sense after the story of Yosef. So let's go weiter. So Gemara says, Hani chamishim osios. 1 second, Gemara says, let's go back. We'll say, it's so exciting. No, it's like, so exciting. Like, when like you can't, sometimes when you can't stay on task, it's a problem, right? What's so exciting about Gemara is Gemara like wants you to be all over the place. It's so exciting, right? We're going from story to story to story. Let's go back for a second. What did we just say? There are 50 letters on each of the shoulder stones of the Kohen. Here's the problem, I will say. If you go ahead and you add up all the letters of all the names of Shvatim, you don't get 49, right? I'm sorry, I just ruined it, right? You don't get 50, right? You don't get 50, you get 49. You get 49, right? Someone says, Hani chamishim osios, chamishim nichichadahav. It's not 50, it's 49. Rabbi Yitzchak, Yosef, Hosifulo os achos. Shneimar, I will say Yosef, right? Yosef ultimately again was given another letter to his name. Shneimar, Edus, B'Yehosef Shemo, B'Tseiswal Eretz Mitzrayim. So we'll say David HaMelech refers to Yosef not as Yosef, but rather as Yehosef. There is a hey added on to Yosef's name. We'll discuss where that comes from. And therefore, I will say that gives you your 50. Well, that's not true, but the pasuk says that the names are written on the shoulder stones of the Kohen Kitoldo Sam. We'll say, what does Kitoldo Sam mean? As they were born, which sounds like their birth names. What was Yosef's birth name? Yosef, without the hey. So what's going on? Elakola Torah Kula, we'll say, watch this. So here's the extra letter. Elakola Torah Kula, Binyamin Ksiv, V'hacha Binyamin Shalem. We'll say generally the name Binyamin is written with only one yud. Beis nun yud mem nun. Here, I'll say on the shoulder stone, it's written Binyamin with two yuds. With two yuds. So an extra yud, Kiddichsiv, Va'ariv Aviv Karalo Binyamin. So we'll say it's interesting. So when Binyamin, is named at birth, he's actually named with two yuds. But that's the only time he's named with two yuds, right? Or he's spelled with two yuds. The rest of the Torah is spelled with one yud. So how is Binyamin's name? So we thought Binyamin's name was written with one yud. Kamash Malan, Binyamin's name is written with two yuds. I just will point out, it's interesting to see, you have this by two of the Shvatim, or maybe even by three of the Shvatim, where their names evolve, right? The first time, right, when Yisachar is born, it's Yisachar. The rest of the Torah, it's Yisachar, right? Binyamin, two yuds at birth, one yud later on. Yosef becomes Yehosef. So interesting a lot of dynamics there. Good. Okay, I'm going to say, here it is. 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Amar Rav Shimon Chasida, Yosef Shekidi Shem Shaim B'Seiser, Hosif Lo Os Achos Mishmo Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yosef, who sanctified the name of Hashem in private, B'Seiser in private, he was privileged. As a result of his Kiddush Hashem, he was given an extra letter to his name, right? That's the Yehosef. He's given the extra hey. Yehuda, Shekidish Shaim B'Farhesa, but Yehuda, who sanctified the name of Hashem in public, right? Ultimately, again, Nikra Kula Shmo Shakadosh Baruch Hu, his entire name, ultimately, again, reflects the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we'll say, now, by the way, what are you saying? But Yehuda's name wasn't changed. It doesn't have to be changed. We'll say, in the name Yehuda, what do you have? Yud, Hey, and then Vav and Hey. In other words, in the name, which is incredible. In the name of, so again, Yosef is given an extra letter, but Yehuda's name itself, by definition, contains the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which I will say is such an incredibly profound yisod. If you think about it, Yud Kei Vav Kei is in the name Yehuda. So which again, the name Yehuda representing Hoda'ah, gratitude. I will say, what do you see from here? That one of the most important midos that a person has to have in order to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hoda'ah, is gratitude. If a person has gratitude for everything they have in life, that's what brings you close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because you begin to recognize, where does all of my stuff come from? Where does it come from? It doesn't come because I earned it, right? It doesn't come because of me. It comes because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's hoda'ah, leads you to Yud Kei Vav Kei. Incredible. So we'll say, what's the story of Yosef? Yosef Mahi, get ready. Right? What's the Yosef story? We'll say one of the most inspiring stories in all of Shas. So we'll say, so again, we're going back now in Jewish history. We are literally all over the place. It was on that day that Yosef came to the house, Lasos Malto, to do his work. So we'll say, what's the context? Yosef was sold to Egypt. He was bought by a guy by the name of Potiphar, right? So what happens? Yosef rises through the ranks. He is put in charge of Potiphar's household. That's it. We know Aisha's Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, has set her eyes upon Yosef and is constantly trying to seduce him. He is strong and rebuffs her efforts. Now the pasuk says it was on that day he came to the house, Lasos Mulachto, to do his work. Rabbi Yochanan Melamed, Shishneim Ledvar Aver Niskavnu. Ultimately, again, I will say, Rabbi Yochanan says on that day, Yosef came home to sin with her. He came to the house to sin with her. He came to his house to do his work. Rabbi Shmuel Chadamar Lasos Malachto Mamish. One says Malachto means work, literally work. V'Chadamar Lasos Tzrachav. Work, Malachto is a metaphor. He didn't come to do his work, right? He came to take care of his needs. That he came to the house that day with the intention to sin with her. Nichnas ve'ein ish me'an shebai. So once he comes to the house, right? No one's home. Says the Gemara, Efshar bayis kodu kebeso shel also rasha. Lo haya bo ish. I don't understand, right? Potiphar was a major guy. Right? A major, like he had a cabinet position. So it's such a big house. No one's home. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, Osa yom chagam haya. It was a day, it was a Yom Tiv. It was a Yom Tiv, right? It wasn't for their idol, for their Avodah Zarah. It was Avodah Zarah Yom Tiv, right? V'holchu kulma beis avodas kachavim. So I'll say to their credit, right? Where did everyone spend Yom Tiv? Where did everyone spend Yom Tiv? Right in the shtibel, right? They spent Yom Tiv right in the beis Avodah Zarah. So everyone's right. V'hi amra lahen cholahi, right? V'hi amra lahen cholahi. So the Gemara says, she said, I'm not feeling well. I'm going to stay home. Now, why did she stay home? Amra ein yom sheniskak li Yosef ki yom hazeh. Ultimately, because she realized who was the only other person who wasn't going to be in the Beis Avodah Zarah that day? Yosef. So she said to herself, there's no better day for me to try to take advantage of this man than today. So Yosef comes into the house. She grabs him by the clothing. And she says to him, sleep with me. Sleep with me. So I just want to point out, just so you understand the enormity of the nisayon, right? I'm sure this lady was a very beautiful woman. So just that nisayon by itself, a man being grabbed by a beautiful woman, and she says, right, it's not like she's couching it like maybe I'm misreading the signals, right? This is pretty explicit, right? She grabs his clothing, sleep with me. So we'll say, so just that by itself, without any other context, is an nisayon that I think most of us would fail. Couple that with the fact that we'll say that's what? Yosef has no one, right? We spoke of this before. Yosef doesn't have a family. Not only does he have a family, he's betrayed by his family. He has no one. A relationship with this woman could provide him with many things. Pleasure being the first, right? Someone else in the world with whom to connect with in an intimate fashion, and a sense of belonging. So I just want to point out, for Yosef, this is not just about satisfying a carnal desire. This is so much more that it could represent for him. I could finally not be the guy on the outside. I could finally not be the outcast. It could represent for me so much opportunity. So I'll say, just pointing out, imagine being Yosef in that moment. Imagine. So I'll say, watch this. So what happens? I'll say in that moment, as she's holding on to his clothing, and she says, sleep with me, the image of his father appears to him in the window. Should we stop here? As I say, now listen to this. So now what happens? So the image of his father appears to him in the window. And he says, Yosef, Yosef, one day your brothers are going to be inscribed on the stones of the ephod, and your name is there alongside them. Do you want your name to be erased from the ephod? The tikra roa zonos. Do you want to be called the shepherd of the harlots? Or in other words, the one who keeps company with the harlots. Tichsiv roa zonos yovat hon. Ultimately, again, he who shepherds, or he who keeps company with zonos, will lose his wealth, which I will say is not a punishment, it's just a cause and effect, right? Because at the end of it, as I said, just want to point out. So remember, Yosef is ready to sin. That's what you see from this Gemara. He is ready to give into his desires. The image of his father goes ahead and says, I will say, what's the message that Yaakov Avinu, so to speak? Now I will say, by the way, Bepashtos, what's the image of his father in the window? What's the image of Yosef's father? Right? So remember again, Chazal tell us that Yosef, Dome klester panim Yosef liYaakov. Yosef looked like Yaakov. He was a spitting image of his father. Now let's say, so what happens? Whose reflection does he see in the window? He sees his own. And when he sees his own reflection, what he sees in that moment is, I'm at a crossroads. If I make this decision, that leads me down one path. If I resist, one day I could look like my father. That's what I'll say. There are moments in life where you have to look at the reflection and decide, who do you want to look like? Not now, but in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now. Because the decisions I make today absolutely have an impact on the person I'm going to be down the road. And the godless of Yosef was, he realized in that moment, he saw his reflection, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be? So often in life, we make decisions and we make them in a vacuum. And we assume, I'll make this decision now and it's not going to impact the future. It's not true. Every decision we make sends us down a particular course in life. Make good decisions, send you down one path. Bad decisions, everybody say, we're going to have to stop over here for today, right? I know mid-story, we're going to see what happens, right? What does Yosef decide? The tension is building, right? What does Yosef decide in Meretz Hashem to be concluded in Meretz Hashem? Say, first of all, tremendous shkayach. We are back on track. We are back on track, Baruch Hashem. What a daf. Shkayach, everyone. Steve, I have to let you know. So I'll let you know by this morning, Emir Hashem. Yeah, Emir Hashem. I will tell him to wait. I will let him know. My pleasure. Good to see you, Jack. Everyone, have a great day, everyone.